Welcome to Gracepilled, where we explore the infinitude of God by talking about God, with God, within God, aka interviews with people spanning the full spectrum of the spiritual path. My name is Hanna, and I will be your guide. I've been studying and practicing in a classical Shakta tantric tradition since 2015, and I just love exploring all of the ways that God wakes up within her own dream. For the last few years, I've been working professionally as a guide, doing one-on-one work and also giving talks and courses. If you ever want to chat with me, you can book a call with me on my website or join my Patreon, which is my massive library of talks and courses I've given over the years. If you want to support the podcast, I now have a $5 tier that you can use as a tip jar for the show, and I really appreciate your support. In this episode, I had the honor of sitting down with the interdisciplinary artist and author Yumi Sakugawa to trace the spiraling, unexpected path of her spiritual life, from childhood flashes of psychic imagery and goth teenage atheism, which I can very much relate with, to meditation and soul retrieval and ancestral reclamation. Yumi is the author of beloved illustration books like There Is No Right Way to Meditate and Your Illustrated Guide to Becoming One with the Universe. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Believer, and exhibitions at the Smithsonian and the Japanese American National Museum. But today, we go beyond Yumi's amazing career accomplishments and explore their inner world. We talk about a recent health scare that became a surprisingly spiritual wake-up call, and how discipline, fueled by the powers of a moon in Virgo, interact with an ongoing creative ritual that makes up the majority of Yumi's creative path. We talk about their Dark Night of the Soul experience, teaching English in Japan, finding meditation through Eckhart Tolle and David Lynch, and how grief led Yumi deeper into ancestral connection with her Okinawan roots. Yumi also shares the story of a traumatic ayahuasca ceremony, something that she's never spoken about publicly before, and the long, slow, embodied healing that followed that experience. And full disclosure, in telling this story and discussing it, neither of us are suggesting that there's anything wrong with plant medicine or ayahuasca. We're simply exploring what that was like for Yumi and also some potential aspects of modern ayahuasca usage that isn't so commonly discussed. So this conversation is intimate, surprising, and rich with insight about intuition, art, diaspora, and the plot twists that shape our entire life. I'm so grateful that we got to speak with each other, and I'm so grateful for Yumi's openness and presence during our conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, hi Yumi. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to Gracepilled.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to hear your story. I'm like really curious.
Gosh, yay.
So just to start here in the beginning, just to kind of get it rolling, is there anything in your life right now like that you're particularly proud of, like a win that you've experienced that you want to share or just kind of brag about?
Oh my gosh, yeah, thank you for asking that. I feel like something that's mundane but not is that I've been a lot more health conscious in the last, I would say in the last 2 years, but it sort of accelerated in the last week because I was told by my doctor that I have high cholesterol and I'm on the cusp of pre-diabetic. So I feel like that's just sort of kicking my butt into high gear health-wise. And so I'm working towards a 3-month follow-up where I want to be an A+ student and at, having healthier numbers. And, I feel like it's one of those things that's very mundane, but also very spiritual, of just really paying attention to my health and what goes into my body and really honoring my rhythms and really prioritizing my physical vessel before other things.
Oh, cool. Okay, so you've been on a journey for a couple of years, and then doctor's visit was like a wake-up call in so many words. Like you were like, whoa, I really gotta do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that with the health and the spirituality thing, because I find for me, part of spirituality is actually really seeing reality clearly.
Absolutely.
Right? And then like health stuff, it's so easy to ignore it, but then sometimes you just have to be with reality of like what your body is and be like, oh, I need to be treating myself differently. And that has like a spiritual quality to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I had this um delulu of, oh, I'm healthy-ish enough. But I think looking back on it, it was like, okay, there were a lot of leniencies that I was underestimating.
Mm-hmm.
And now the writing's on the wall and I just have to lock into a much healthier regimen. And I'm kind of really excited about it because I'm a Virgo moon and I think no wait, tell me your sun and rising sign.
I'm Aquarius sun, Virgo moon, Cancer rising.
Okay, I'm a Aquarius rising, Sagittarius sun. For we have a lot of overlap. I love that.
That's funny. Anyway, so you have this disciplined Virgo moon.
Yeah, I think in a weird way, I feel like I'm getting domed by my high cholesterol and potential pre-diabetic status. And so I'm like, okay, I surrender to this situation and I'm gonna work really hard. So
Totally.
I don't know. Sometimes I just need that container and the circumstance that to rouse me to galvanize me to do things I otherwise wouldn't do. I feel like that's also a lot of people.
No, totally. Well, I know that you've like taught a course about creative discipline. Do you feel like there's some similar principles with health that you would apply in that area or vice versa?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So in my webinar workshop, Discipline is Pleasure, it's a workshop I've taught many times at this point. I talk a lot about the importance of containers where you create this portal of set time where you enter this time and space where you have a specific intention and your consciousness is sort of elevated to match that task. And so I feel like in creativity, that's really important. At least for me, I like to have defined time intervals of doing creative work. And so I feel like the same is for, say, fitness or having this container of time to cook a healthy meal. And I think also that also goes into spirituality, like doing a ritual or doing a meditation. You're carving out this chunk of time where that is different from the autopilot of everyday life, where you're really focusing your attention to something that you are very intentional about.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, like purposefully having periods of time where you're breaking out of autopilot.
Yeah.
To grow something new, whether that's like awareness of your body and health or creativity or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so your win is like really saying yes to health and like going all in with that for now.
Yeah, and also I just turned 40 in December, so I feel like something about reaching that new decade. I really want to, I don't know if taking myself seriously is the right word, but I think it's really valuing myself and not being half measured in that. Like if I want to value myself, I want to go all in, whether that's health or relationship or cultivating my creative practice.
Yeah, like the all-encompassing process of valuing yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally, I feel that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm 33, so I'm a little bit younger than you, but I've been feeling like very aware of my mortality recently. I think even especially on this tour that I just went on with my boyfriend, we were around a lot of people in their early 20s and I was like, "Whoa, aging is real." So I just think that my hope for myself is that as I age, I become more awake to how precious it is to be in this body.
Yeah.
And to just love it more and more and take more and more care of it instead of just kind of letting it go to the wayside and living with those consequences.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Yumi, let's transition into like the spiritual thing because we were just touching on it a little bit. Like, how would you describe your spirituality or your spiritual path or practice?
Yeah, what a question. Well, I don't really belong to, I wouldn't say there's a specific lineage that I closely identify with. I feel like there are multiple threads that sort of make up my spiritual practice. I think one big event in my life was when I was really depressed after college and I was working abroad in Japan as an English language teacher, which I was horrible at. And I also didn't have access to my antidepressants or friends or community, and just feeling really isolated. And my boss hated me. And so I feel like that period of life was a really mentally low point in my life. And I've spoken about this before in books or other interviews, but basically it just so happened that one of my colleagues who was really into yoga and spirituality introduced me to Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth. And that was my first introduction to really having presence and having space between your thoughts and not always 100% identifying with your ego voice. And then also similarly around the same time, I was introduced to David Lynch's book, Catching the Big Fish. His book about creativity and consciousness and meditation, and how his meditation practice really amplified his creative work, as well as his overall sense of happiness and peace of mind. And so I feel like when in being in such a low point mentally, where I really was so unhappy with myself in my life, I felt like meditation was one of those things that I felt like, okay, I'm just going to throw myself into this and see what happens. And also I've had a history of depression and complex PTSD, which I didn't know at that time, as well as other issues. And so I feel like meditation sort of opened the door for me to then explore more about spiritual traditions. And also very serendipitously, I after my year-long stint working as an English language teacher, I got back to Los Angeles and I was hired to work for Deepak Chopra's daughter's internet startup, which is so random, but it just felt like one of those serendipitous things of like, okay, I started meditating and then now I'm doing this, and now I'm interfacing with a lot of spiritual authors and their works. And also I feel like sort of organically I started making drawings about my own meditation experience. I've been writing and drawing comics before that, but I feel like that was my first time making comics about meditation and sort of making visual something that could be a really abstract concept for people.
I love that.
And yeah, and so that just sort of started taking a life of its own over the next couple of years, where I made a whole zine about it. I also posted about it on Tumblr. And eventually these zines became published books. And so that ended up taking this whole life and momentum of its own that I was not expecting at all. And then I would say it wasn't until my early 30s that I sort of got more into the witchy occult path.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Which also coincided, I think, with the decline and eventual end of a 10-year relationship that I was in that was towards the end not a healthy relationship. And I feel like because I was becoming more aware of my feminine power, and I think that also coincided with having stronger women friendships and getting into tarot, getting into astrology, getting into this community of really awesome witches and intuitives and artists. And so that's a whole other thread. And then I think most recently I visited Okinawa, which is my paternal homeland. So I was born here in the States, but my parents, they're from Japan. My mom is from mainland Japan. My father's side is from Okinawa. And so I feel like in visiting Okinawa 2 years ago at this point, and this was also coinciding with everything that was starting to happen in Gaza. I feel like there was then also just a lot of deep reflection, and I think also just like a very deep inner rupture and grief, as well as joy, I think, and just really coming to terms with Okinawa's colonized past and that whole lineage of spirituality and history that I think was denied to me, and wanting to know more about that, because Okinawa has this whole rich tradition of female priestesses and shamans, and how women were considered to be basically the to represent the domain of spirituality. And so that's a whole area that is my lineage, but I don't really know too much about. So I feel like that's also the beginning of a journey that
Okay, so you feel like that's like kind of where you're starting to move towards now, like that's growing. That's
yeah,
growing.
I feel like that's one of the things I'm starting to go into. And I feel like also in the last, and I can't believe it's already been like almost 3 years now, but I think also as an artist and person with a public platform speaking out for Palestine, I feel like that was also a really, I think, I think a big evolution in me as a person and being a person of this world where a lot of unspeakable suffering is happening right in front of us.
Right, but am I hearing you say that like what's been happening in Gaza inspired you to look at the colonization that your lineage experienced in Okinawa? I just want to make sure I'm getting you. Like there was like a thread there of wanting to reflect on that in yourself.
Yes, I feel like I was aware of Okinawa's colonized history, but I think going there in person for the first time in almost 18 years with Gaza happening as a backdrop, I think there was first maybe the intellectual awareness of it, but then being in Okinawa then brought the somatic awareness of it that was just so deep and so intense, but also ultimately I felt like something I really had to go through that was really important to me.
Okay, yeah. So going there physically for the first time in almost 2 decades, you had like this like embodied experience where you were like getting information about how important this is to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, totally. I'd actually love, like, if you feel comfortable talking about it, like, I'd love to hear more about the history of colonized Okinawa. I know nothing about that. But we don't have to do that right now. Maybe we could like go through like this whole story of your spiritual life and then maybe end there. Does that sound like a good progression?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Because I'm hearing you say that like you're saying, you studied abroad in Japan, you were having a really bad time. That bad time pushed you to experiment with meditation, pushed you to experiment like with David Lynch's work. Yeah. And then you got into the witchy occult stuff. Now you're kind of trying to reclaim your like ancestral spiritual practices. And so my curiosity is like, what was it like when you were a kid? Like, did you have like spiritual feelings, or were you an atheist when you were a kid? Like, what was it like for you?
Yeah, so, and also even to go back further before that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you are familiar with the psychic Marcella Kroll, but
I've heard of her for sure.
Okay, so she used to live in Los Angeles. I have 2 of her oracle decks, and
oh, cool.
I really love her work and her as a person. But early, I want to say in the mid 2010s, Marcella hosted a workshop that was, I forget how it was called exactly, but it has something to do with a guided visualization leading you into a past life experience. And I think this was probably my first time doing it. And the the download I got was that I was some kind of, I want to say, priestess or something in ancient Greece. And so I had these like flashes of images of standing in this arena or stadium, and I'm like basically kind of flashing everybody, but in this priestess like way.
In a priestess way.
No. In a revered way.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
For sure.
and then it just kind of flashes forward to the end of my life, because I think part of the guided visualization was, how did you die in this past life, and sort of what were sort of your regrets or final thoughts. And I remember that, I was this much older woman living in the forest with a younger lover and this white wolf dog. And I guess like in that lifetime, it was probably the fall of the empire. And I just remember thinking, I wish I hadn't run away and left when things were getting really bad. I wish I stayed to to fight with everybody else. And I feel like that just really stayed with me. And then, as things politically have been getting increasingly more and more dystopian, and of course we're living in a fascist state, and the US empire is starting to fall apart. I feel like I go back to that experience, and I think it's just sort of this inner reminder of like, well, I can't just put my head in the sand or just kind of like run off to another country. I need to be involved with communities, and not necessarily unnecessarily endanger myself, but I need to be involved and informed and be a part of liberation and not be a passive bystander.
Whoa. Whoa. Whoa, that is so interesting and intense. But like you're saying, like past life meditation recalled like information of like I turned away from things in the past and I regretted it. And now I get to not rectify, because it's not, but like I get to like do something different now.
Yeah.
Because a past version of me regretted that. That's so interesting.
Right, because I totally thought the past life regret was gonna be like, oh, I wish I loved more. Something what we think more, I guess, or boring. Like, oh, I wish I let more love into my life, or I wish I was, I don't know, more open to love. But this was just like a little more specific, and I was like, oh, wow, okay.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So you're like feeling like the word embodied is in my head right now, but it's like I need to like really be here with what's happening.
Yeah.
And contribute to my best ability to create a better world instead of turning away from it.
Right. Or pretend that
it's really beautiful. No, totally. 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 Yeah. And like I'm even thinking about like imagining what it was like to be alive during the fall of the Roman Empire or Greek. I don't know which one fell first. I can't remember. But it's like it was potentially even easier to disappear because there wasn't the internet. Or there wasn't like the news.
We never hear about
ever again.
Ever again.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's like you could technically do that now, but it's like much harder. So that's really interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whoa. Okay, so in some ways, like part of your path is also in the past. Like the story of your spiritual life is like this is like part of it.
So.
Totally.
The other thing I forgot to mention is I haven't like publicly shared this before, so I might share this with you. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so the other thing that happened to me in, I would say the second half of my 30s is that I sat with ayahuasca at a ceremony that my friends invited me to with somebody they had sat with before. in the LA area. And long story short, it was like the most traumatizing experience of my life. And I want to say 8 months later, I finally was able to connect with I want to say Reiki healer, somebody who does something along those lines, who has a lot of experience with ayahuasca, as well as having seen a lot of people who has had bad experiences with ayahuasca. And so when she heard about my experience, she was like, oh, I think what happened to you is that you had a soul fragmentation, and the experience was so intense that a small piece of your soul left your body and is afraid to go back into your body. And so when she saw me and I was lying down, and I think she did like maybe an hour or so of energy healing, and she was like, "Oh yeah, just as I thought, there was a piece of your soul hovering over your body, and I brought it back in, and you should start feeling normal in the next couple of weeks." And before that, um I was feeling completely disembodied. I was having psychic stimuli that I had never experienced before. I was
Just
scared.
like in your waking, sober reality.
In my waking state after sitting in ceremony, I truly was terrified that I completely permanently damaged my brain.
Whoa.
And I was scared to sleep. And also also the experience itself was really terrifying, where I think it was sort of spiritually the most scary things I've ever experienced, where it was really going through the experience of death and also sort of experiencing the time dilation of, let's say, the universe being destroyed and recreated like an infinite amount of times, and then just being this tiny speck.
Yeah, over the course of like several hours, you live like 10 lifetimes, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and then I think also I think it was the first time I somatically confronted, I think, total spiritual nihilism of, oh, everything's meaningless, everything's an illusion, there's no point in anything. And
Wait, that was new? That was new for you?
Yes, I've never had this experience before. So I feel like that was sort of my first major dark night of the soul experience. And I think now, years later, I could look back on this and reframe it as, oh, this was this horrible thing I went through and now I'm fine. But at the time, I think I really truly was in a dark place.
Absolutely.
And also just scared out of my mind and feeling completely unsafe in my mind and body.
Absolutely.
And so I was really forced to have to ask for a lot of help from my friends and my community, where I wasn't working the whole time. I would ask friends constantly if I could sleep over at their place or sleep over at my apartment, because
it was scary to sleep.
It was scary, especially at night, to fall asleep. And also just feeling like I didn't have control over my own mind, because I would just get psychic stimuli or just feel sensations and things that weren't in the external world. And so it was really scary.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily need to have a silver lining lesson to all of this or anything, but it really did force me to really lean on to other people.
Yeah. When I think about stuff like that, as using language of silver lining or whatever, my semi-neutral way of talking about stuff like that in my own life is like looking back on it, for sure, not in the moment, but like looking back, being like, that was just part of the plot.
Yeah, I love that. That was part of the plot.
It sounds like that was something that was part of the plot, but obviously it was really painful and traumatic and difficult, but you came out on the other side of it with information about what you don't like, and maybe some new information, like your community. Like, did your community show up for you, or what was that like for you?
Did. Yeah, I've had a couple of healers in the community offer me free sessions. And also It was also a lot of gathering information from different healers and, you know, them tapping into their resources and asking about how.
Well, wait, did the soul fragmentation thing, did that work? Did something happen after that when she brought your piece back into yourself?
No, it really did.
It did? Okay, you did. I didn't know if it worked or not. So
Yeah,
it worked.
yeah, I forgot to say this explicitly, but yeah, after the soul was brought back into my body, that was when my healing of getting better truly began.
Yeah.
Like, if I didn't have that, I don't know what would have happened.
Whoa. Wow. Okay, so like things really started shifting after that.
It did, but it still took a really long time.
Yeah.
Like, I would say sitting with ayahuasca, that was mid 2017. And then I had my soul fragment come back through that healer in January of 2018. And I feel like it wasn't still for the rest of 2018, even though I was getting better, I think I still also had a lot of PTSD from the whole experience.
Yeah.
So it was a really long process. And even to this day, I still get kind of anxious if I'm going to sleep somewhere and there's nobody else in the house or room with me.
I get you. Yeah. Is there anything, like, just for somebody who's listening, like, is there anything you wish you had known going into that experience that you think might be helpful for somebody who might say yes to an ayahuasca ceremony themselves?
I think just being aware of the fact that these bad experiences can happen, because I feel like, and I really felt like I did my due diligence on my part, where I wasn't willy-nilly about participating in the ceremony, because of course you hear how intense it is and how you confront your traumas and it's like you're dying. But I felt like a lot of friends who had gone through it, they ultimately framed it as a positive experience of just gaining a lot of insight and really just getting a lot of information that was useful to them. And so I think I had never heard of anybody just speak about going through what you went through.
Totally.
And so
like, you did your research, but you had never really heard someone go through what you went through. So it was like unexpected in a sense, even though you
I would bring it up to other people who would be interested in those kinds of things. They also would be like, oh yeah, I've never heard anybody say you went through. And so yeah, I think just knowing that could happen, but if it does happen, knowing also that, you know, there are people who have gone through that, and that there are, I think, resources and healers who are, I think, equipped to help you get through that.
Yeah, like maybe even going into it with some awareness of what those resources may be.
For sure.
Not assuming it's going to happen, but just so you know, you have something to go to afterwards.
I mean, I know somebody, a friend of a friend, who also had a traumatic ayahuasca experience a couple of years ago, and she's still going through it. And also, you know, I don't know what her recovery is going to be like. So it's just one of those things where you just have to tread really carefully.
Totally. Yeah, like weigh the risks and maybe feel clear enough about your goal for doing it to,
for sure,
like, make it feel like it's worth it. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. Yeah.
Because I really felt like, oh, this is calling to me. My friends are doing it. It just kind of fell into place. And I really did felt like I was following those, you know, signs from the universe to do this. And so I feel like I did, in some moments, kind of felt this betrayal of my own intuition. But
I get that. Yeah.
You know, but I think sometimes it's like, well, sometimes bad things just happen. And again, like, there's no silver lining or greater meaning or lesson. It, as you said, it's part of the plot.
Part of the plot.
You just have to go through.
Yeah.
as best as you can.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Wow. What was it like to tell that story? You said you'd never said that out loud in public before.
Um, it feels good. I feel like it for the longest time because I was in it, I felt like I just wasn't in the capacity to tell the story, but I feel like at this point there's been enough distance that
Yeah.
I could tell it and not be traumatized.
Totally. I don't know. I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm sure there's going to be some people listening who probably have had similar experiences. Maybe people are, I'm just making an assumption. This is literally just me wondering, but I wonder if there are a lot of people who have that experience, but because of the vibe of what ayahuasca gives people, which can be very good, people are afraid to say something because the feeling is just like, oh, this is so transformative, like no matter what. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, maybe you just had a really shitty experience, it's the extent of it, and that's also totally valid.
Totally. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, whoa. So it's so go ahead.
Say, so when I saw an energy healer maybe a couple of weeks after the ayahuasca experience, this woman was reading my energy field and she was like, and afterwards she was like, oh my God, Yumi, there are huge holes in your energy field. All of your chakras are backwards. And she was like, it was like your ego was ripped. Like you shed, like you were like 5 layers of your ego was ripped off. And
oh, whoa.
I totally felt that. Yeah.
Oh, whoa. So was it validating to hear them say that?
It was. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. Totally. Whoa. Yeah, man. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes I mean, this is just my take, and like people can have a problem with this if they want. I don't really care. But sometimes I wonder, especially with these like ayahuasca is like a South American ceremonial tradition. And so it's like sometimes I wonder like what stability or like what it's like to do that outside of the cultural context of the thing. And I'm not saying anyone's at fault here, but I'm just kind of wondering like if you grow up in that sort of religious atmosphere, if there's less of a chance of these like really intense things happening when you're like in the bubble of that stability of the tradition, and maybe there's like medicine people living nearby versus like doing something in America, even if there are like super legit elders that are doing all of it. I just sometimes wonder like the efficacy of things can also be cumulative with like all of the different elements that make the process stable versus it being separated from its source, regardless of like diasporic traditions and all these sorts of things. But are you with me with kind of like what I'm wondering about?
Oh no, absolutely. And even with, say, if you were to say go to a center, like a person from America flew to South America, maybe closer to the source, at the end of the day, you still have to fly back home and, not have those community resources as well as sort of lived cultural context.
Totally. It's like like you go from any culture to another culture, any culture goes to another culture. It's like you have different constructs on what you think reality is.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. And so then like all of a sudden you go to a different religious tradition that has spirits working within a different worldview, and your mental constructs aren't even matching that. Who knows what would happen? I'm just like speculating.
Yeah.
And so it's just just kind of interesting how much our constructs about how reality works that we get from whatever culture we grew up in may impact the way certain rituals or traditions like actually are experienced in our mind. I don't know. Absolutely. This is just my thing I'm curious about. I'm wondering if you think anything about that.
Oh no, I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying. I feel like as much as you say do research or about something like, let's say, ayahuasca, you're still ingesting the information from a specific Western lens. And not to say that the people who have done ayahuasca are doing anything wrong, but I think that's just also something to have into consideration. Basically, where are you coming from to attend this ceremony? That may be completely different from what you grew up with, that you only have a very cursory knowledge of.
Yeah, where are you coming from is a really interesting question, because it's not just like physically where are you coming from, ethnically where you're coming from. It's also like, where is your mind coming from?
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't like deconstructed materialism and to like being like physical reality thing is the only thing that's real, and then you start having non-ordinary experiences with psychedelics, like what is that? You're gonna have like a wildly painful experience versus somebody who grows up in a culture of animism or like immateriality, where like the non-physical and the physical are the same thing. Like that's gonna change the way you have these psychedelic experiences.
Absolutely.
Wow, interesting. Interesting. Well, I am chomping at the bit to kind of like understand more about like your life and maybe like what it's been like for you just moving through reality and having any sort of spiritual or mystical experiences when you were younger that maybe led you to actually turning towards meditation and spirituality and all these things, because there's a lot of people who go through like a hard thing like you went through in Japan who don't turn towards meditation at all. They're like, no. So it's like, why did you say yes to that? You know, like what's there? And so I have curiosity about that. And so, like, was your family particularly religious or spiritual, or like,
No.
okay, so you grew up in like a secular household?
Yeah, I mean, I think with my mom who grew up in Japan and my dad who grew up in Okinawa, I feel like there are I feel like, say, aspects of whether it's Buddhism or Shintoism, I feel like it was sort of more cultural than spiritual for me. Sort of being um exposed to those things. And then, I grew up in a pretty predominantly white suburbs, though I would say there are also, people of color. So I wasn't completely so predominantly white, but I was definitely an ethnic minority growing up, and a lot of my peers were Christian or Jewish. And so I was also surrounded by people who had very defined religious traditions. I also have a couple of Muslim and Hindu friends as well. And so I did remember just feeling a little left out because other people seem to have like such strongly defined spiritual traditions, whether it was going to church or having a bar mitzvah or observing Ramadan. And I feel like I didn't really have that. And but I think as a kid, intuitively, I kind of was always interested in spiritual things, but not necessarily wanting to dive into a specific organized religion or lineage. And then I think also because I was self-diagnosing myself as someone with depression, even as maybe an eighth grader, I think I think that also brought an interest in self-help books and psychology, which I think was maybe the gateway to getting more into spirituality. And oh, and then I think in high school I was like, oh, I'm a hardcore atheist, like God is dead. That I feel like that was a phase I went through.
Totally.
And
Well, when you were a kid, you're saying like when I was a kid, I was interested in spiritual things, but maybe not like organized religion. Like, what do you mean, like fairies in the yard or something? Or like, what was it? Like,
yeah, I think I did like, believe in fairies, but I think in a sort of more generalized way that a lot of kids believe in different things. I did have some psychics tell me that, like, oh yeah, you were a psychic as a kid, but you just didn't know it, or you just didn't know what to do with it. And I guess, like, I remember maybe when I was maybe in kindergarten or something, I would sort of have these like flashing images in my head that kind of look like Mayan art. So I'm like, I don't know. Is that a past life thing? I don't know.
No, that's interesting.
And I guess, like, looking back on my childhood, I was like, oh yeah, I guess there were times when I was like sort of like nearing that asleep slash half awake state where I would hear noises, but I would just sort of explain that away as like, oh, that's just my brain working overtime as I'm falling asleep, not necessarily psychic information. But ever since a psychic told me that, I was like, oh, maybe that was sort of like just psychic stimuli that was just kind of coming through. So I didn't know what to do about it.
Totally. Yeah. Or like you just weren't in an environment where you could have talked to somebody about it and they would have had a explaining story for like what that is.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think I just I remember thinking like, oh, maybe God is the sun because I don't know, learning about the Egyptians or something. And I think also just being really swayed and reading astrology in the newspaper.
Ooh, like you would like flip open the newspaper and look for it because you wanted to know.
Yeah.
Totally.
And just like being really, I guess, superstitious in some ways. So I feel like maybe those were sort of the beginning threads a bit. And also I feel like I really loved reading advice columns. So I feel like that also sort of contributed to that interest in self-help, and then later just sort of like framing words in art in ways that would be helpful to people, like sort of breaking down concepts and being able to express that to people. I feel like that also became a thing.
Oh, so you felt like very compelled by how could I efficiently like help myself like through the self-help stuff and then also like maybe help to explain things to other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like you're a teacher and you're an artist and all these sorts of things. Like there were some seeds there back then that
For sure.
grew to what you are now.
For sure.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're kind of like potentially psychic child. Having your experience, I feel like I had so many non-ordinary psychedelic experiences when I was a kid that I never really thought about until I got a little bit older.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you like ended up becoming a high schooler and then you were like, God is dead, like I'm an atheist. Like, was that just like from like learning about science or something? Or like what happened with that?
Well, I feel like even early on, I think I had this maybe doubt of, organized religion being representing the literal truth of things.
Totally.
And so I felt like, there was that angsty goth light kid in me that was like anti-establishment and anti conformity, and me thinking that organized religion represented those things. And
oh, totally.
And so yeah, in being like, oh, God doesn't exist or God is dead or whatever. I think also, in high school you start reading Nietzsche and
No, 100%.
then and all that. And so it just seemed, I guess, cool.
Yeah. Totally.
But there was also a grain of truth in me being interested in those things where I think I just didn't quite vibe with organized religion. And
yeah,
I would
know for sure.
Something else.
For sure. I think it's like when I think back on the stuff I was really passionate about when I was a teenager or things that I really felt strongly about, when I look back on it, like I was right about a lot of stuff. I just didn't have enough life experience to like ground it.
Yeah.
And so, like, does that feel resonant with you? It's like,
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Like there was a certain inner instinct and intuition of framing certain things. And yeah, like you said, I just didn't quite have the life experience or the conceptual intellect to frame it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So when did you went to college and you studied abroad in college and then
Or I worked abroad
okay.
after college. I went to UCLA as an undergrad studying fine art and Japanese.
Oh, cool.
I did study abroad for half a semester in Singapore, and that was really awesome.
Oh, okay, cool. Was there any time, okay, wait, so were you always an artist? Like you,
Yeah,
like,
I would say so. Yeah.
like it was obvious to you that you were going to go to art school, or like, what do you think?
I think it was obvious to me that I was either going to be a visual artist or a writer or something within that spectrum.
Did you, like, when you were younger, view art as like something adjacent to spirituality at all, or did that grow as you got older?
I think that came later. I think really for me, primarily as a kid, I think drawing and writing was a form of escapism, and also
100%.
also because I was a painfully shy kid who hated talking. I think that art and writing then was a safe space where I felt that I could really express myself fully.
Oh, totally. Right. So that was really what was motivating you when you were younger.
Yeah.
Was like an outlet to like fully express
For
what
sure.
you're feeling, for sure. I
I
get
also
that.
do feel like I was good at something.
100%. Oh my God, 100%. Yeah, I actually I went to the Laguna College of Art and Design in Laguna Beach, and so an hour south of LA, and just for 1 year, and then I dropped out of college because I started to think that like art this was in like 2010. I started to think like, oh, art is just like a waste of time, like the world is ending. I need to become a farmer and do something that's actually going to help the world. But I look back on that and I was like, I feel so differently about art now. But back then, I feel like I didn't have like as full of a vision of how transformative and potentially spiritual the creation process is. And before I was like, oh, this is just so self-obsessed. I'm just trying to be really good at something. I heard you say it felt good to be good at something, and I relate with that. Like I was like very motivated by that. And then I think as I've gotten older, my vision of how productive it truly is to create art has completely transformed. Yeah.
Wait, so after you dropped out of college, what did you do? Did you become a farmer?
I did.
Oh, tell me more.
Say a little bit about that. I dropped out of college, and then I used to have Swedish citizenship. Okay. And I lost it. It's a longer story. It's not because I did anything wrong, but I just lost the citizenship. And so I flew to Sweden and I did woofing, which used to be way more of a thing. I don't even know if it's still a thing.
Yeah, no idea.
I woofed on several farms over the course of like a year. And I studied like esoteric farming techniques at a Rudolf Steiner college in England. I have probably worked on like 10 farms total, like for extended periods of time. I switched from farming to landscaping, and I had a landscaping business for 6 years. And so it's really only been in the last like 3 or 4 years that I've been off of the land, so to speak, because I dropped out of art school and then like went full hog into studying ecology and agriculture and nature and plants and all these things for like a very long time. And now I'm pretty removed from it. I'm actually trying to come back. I had to kind of swing in the other direction super hard.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find like my middle ground, but
yeah,
to answer your question, yes.
Well, why would you describe what you do now if you're not as involved in like explicitly involved in land things?
Oh, like what I do now?
Yeah.
I mean, now I'm just I just work full time as just like a spiritual mentor and guide, and I teach and advise people to the best of my ability, or help them to become their own advisors, actually would be my preference.
Yeah.
And then I also have an art business, and a lot of my art is actually plants that I've drawn and things like this. But Yeah, I have a chronic illness and it really knocked me out in 2021. And so I had to quit doing manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically since 2021, I've been doing stuff like mostly online and working from home.
Mm-hmm.
But there's pros and cons to it. There's
For
pros
sure.
and cons to it. I do like not working my body to the bone constantly,
Yeah.
but I do feel very disconnected from the cycles of nature ever since I
Yeah.
stopped literally working directly with the land. There's a major difference that I've noticed.
Oh, I could only imagine.
Yeah.
I've never been so immersed in land work as you have, and I can only imagine how much it really energetically imprints on you.
No, totally. Yeah, I almost like it's like I didn't realize how much it meant to me until I was away from it
Mm-hmm.
because I was just like so immersed in it. But I'm like I said before, I'm trying to kind of come back to reclaim it and find it in a new way. Living in Denver, it's a little bit harder than when I was living in a little bit more of a natural setting, but I could find a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to UCLA for fine art, and then after you graduated, that's when you did the abroad program teaching English in
Yeah.
Japan. And then it was rough.
Oh, yeah, I was horrible at it.
Oh, wait, so you were literally bad at your job? Like, what do you mean? Like,
Well, so I think with a lot of so I feel like people who are depressed teaching English in another country, that's its own specific
oh,
niche experience where when I bring it up, other people are like, oh yeah, I got it. Because I feel like a lot of these English language teaching programs, I think the appeal of it for college graduates and people generally looking for something to do with their lives is that it doesn't require very much, I think, beyond a college degree and being able to speak English and being willing to move to another country. And then so I think because there's so much I would say supply and demand of people who want to learn English just because of the geopolitics of it all. And then all these unemployed young people who need a job. And so I think, speaking for my specific experience, but I think it's also common in other schools and companies, you really are just thrown in there with probably less than a week of training of, how to teach English language to non-English speakers. And also, it wasn't like I was out teaching a bunch of high school students. So this was an after school program. And so I was teaching small classes that ranged from 3 years old to the elderly and every age group in between.
whoa.
And so I felt like I was just kind of thrown in there. And also the other complicating factor that I think was more specific to me is that I am pretty conversationally competent in Japanese. But I had to pretend that I couldn't speak Japanese because part of the after school language program ethos is, oh, you're immersed in an English language only environment. And I think, if you're a person who doesn't speak Japanese anyway, then it's like, okay, well, I'm here as an English language teacher. But I felt like I had to sort of do this weird deceitfulness of,
Yeah.
like pretending that I couldn't understand Japanese. And, I had to go by my middle name, which is Christina, as opposed to my first name, Yumi. And so I felt like I was also just
weird.
Exactly. I was like pretending to be someone I was not. And so I think.
And you also like couldn't fully express yourself, like quite literally.
Right.
Whoa. Yeah, that's interesting. I think when I've seen several people throughout my life actually specifically go to Japan to teach English as a second language, but they were not ethnically Japanese.
Right.
They were like people from all over.
Right.
And so it's interesting for you to be in that specific experience of that. Oh, you have to like hold back on like the truth of like what you are. Which is so it's so ironic.
I know.
So ironic.
And I think also, you know, growing up Japanese Okinawan American, I feel like, and then I went to Japanese language school on Saturdays as a kid growing up, and I hated it. And I think, you know, I felt like I didn't belong in Japanese culture, and feeling alienated from that. And so I felt like, you know, on top of not being able to speak Japanese and pretending to be a person that I'm not, I think also on a bigger level, just being in Japan, I think just having to sort of reckon with all of those aspects of identity and culture, and
oh my God,
being multicultural, and
totally
sort of all the baggage that comes with being
and it sounded like you were there alone, like you didn't have friends that came with you, or did you have any family there that you could see?
Well, it was a really interesting experience insofar that there was like one job opening that very specifically was in this very small town where my grandparents lived. So I actually did get to live with my grandparents.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So in that sense, I wasn't alone, but also I felt that it was at the same time really hard for me, because I think there are aspects of Japanese culture that is very formal and can be not emotionally intimate.
I get you. I get you. Literally.
And so I felt like that was a whole other layer of me feeling like, oh, I don't have this space that's just for me, where I could just be myself. I had to be on guard, you know, at work, at my relative's home, as a person who's not a native Japanese person, being out and about in society. So I felt like I was just out of place everywhere.
Yeah, that sounds so confusing. That sounds so confusing. How long were you there? Was it like a year or 2 years?
A long contract.
It was a year. Okay. And were you just like ready to go at the end of that year?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was Charlie, they wanted to fire me, but they couldn't find a replacement quickly enough to replace me while my contract was going on. And so yeah, I was doing so bad at this job.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoa. And so when you came back to the United States after that?
Yes.
And what was it like for you when you came back?
I think this huge relief, because I had started a long distance relationship. Basically, I had met my boyfriend at the time 3 months before I left for Japan.
Oh, whoa.
And so I also had this long distance boyfriend. And so for me, I just sort of felt this immediate relief of being away from this horrible job that I was failing at, where my boss hated me. And also being back with my boyfriend. But then I think there then also was the angst of then having to find a new job, and also being a person in their early 20s of like, okay, well, what do I do now? I just failed miserably at my first real job out of college. So what am I supposed to do now?
Yeah. Yeah, what did you end up doing?
Oh, so very serendipitously, it was a thing I mentioned before.
The Deepak Chopra's daughter.
Chopra's daughters.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Just so random.
Okay, and so then this is where it starts to kind of I don't know if the word pick up is right, but like it is. Okay. Yeah, like it picked up with meditation and self-help and figuring out some things around that period of time.
For sure.
Totally. What was it like for you? Do you remember when you first started meditating? Like, did you like it, or did you kind of suffer through it? Like, what was that like for you?
I really love the challenge of it, I think, because I didn't really have anything else to do as far as feeling better. I really put myself into it, and I think I even had these really energetically concentrated moments of really suddenly, even if momentarily, just really feeling complete presence. that energetic feeling of complete presence and just really feeling connected to everything around me. And so it really energetically shifted everything in my life.
Mm. Wait, I just had a thought. When you were in Japan, you went to art school, so to speak, right? It was art school at UCLA.
Yeah, I was an art
And
school.
then you go to Japan. Did you like maintain like an art practice when you were there, or did you like drop that when you were teaching?
I think I was continuing to draw and write, but I think it also was sporadic because I was so depressed. And also, I think it was fueled by this desperation of, oh, I need to become a really good artist so I could be a full-time artist and, you know, prove myself to the world that I could be an artist. And I even entertained ideas of applying to an MFA program in illustration. And ultimately, I'm glad I didn't because I just got really lazy with the application process. But also, I feel like, ultimately things worked out, and I feel like I have a pretty active career in
Totally.
So,
like without the masters, you didn't get the masters.
I did not.
Yeah.
But I feel like in my early 20s, I was just kind of really spinning my wheels, really wanting to prove myself and really have some sort of tangible proof that, oh, I can make it as an artist or illustrator or comic book artist or somewhere along those lines.
Who were you trying to prove it to?
To
yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, you wanted to prove it to yourself that you could really do the thing.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Do you feel less of that proving energy now, or has that maintained?
Oh yeah, I feel way less of it now. It's great.
Oh, okay, it's good. Okay, wait, so needing to constantly prove yourself to yourself, that wasn't a good experience. That was like frustrating?
I mean, I felt like it was a double-edged sword where I think it did push me to put out artwork and to be proactive about that. But I think ultimately it's not a sustainable mental framework to be in because you just constantly feel like shit. And so I felt like, by the time I reached my early 30s, I think I really had to do a deep reflection of, okay, I'm not really happy constantly having to push myself to make good work and being validated by the system. So what can I do to shift that so that I can actually find pleasure and enjoyment in making art again, while also being committed to making good art, but in a way that doesn't feel so self-punitive. And I think that was also one of the big inspirations for putting together my workshop about creative discipline and pleasure. Because I feel like a lot of artists go through what I went through, which is just being very self-punitive and constantly feeling that they're not good enough. And then just really sucking the joy out of the creative process, which is
originally the thing that gives you so much joy.
Right, exactly.
And then you suck it dry, 100%.
Yeah, and then combine that with sort of the matrix of capitalism where all worth is determined by profit, then like no wonder so many people are messed up in their relationship to their creative process.
Totally. Oh yeah, because it's overly tied to like this needs to be made so that it can be exchanged for money. Absolutely. And then if it's exchanged for money, that means that it's good.
Right.
Versus just like the inherent worth of like making something. 100%. 100%. Huh. So you were understandably a bit too depressed in Japan to be consistently making art, but then you came back to the United States and you were still trying to like make your career happen, and that's when you said yes to like doing the stuff with Deepak Chopra's daughter and stuff like this. What were you doing for them? Were you recording or illustrating, or like what was happening with that?
So it was an internet startup called intent.com.
Oh, okay.
And I think at the time the company wanted to be basically like Twitter. I think Twitter was sort of in its nascent stages then. basically like Twitter, but specifically for sharing intentions. And
Oh, that's kind of interesting.
and also I think, parallel to that, there was also a blog where different spiritual authors and healers contributed. And so I feel like because it was a small team, internet startup, and then this was also back when people working remotely was weird. So I think nobody believed me when I said I had a job, when I was just, at a cafe or at home with a laptop all the time. That was just kind of weird at the time.
Yeah.
So I basically just wore many different hats.
Yeah.
So I answered support emails, I edited blog posts.
Yeah.
I put together PowerPoint presentations. Sometimes I would do graphics and illustrations. And so I felt like this job was sort of my sneaky way of doing illustrations and
100%.
creating content on the company dime.
Yeah, nice. I love that. Yeah, take advantage of that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so as I understand it, it's like you get back, you have this maybe the first dark night of the soul in your hand,
I would
right?
say so.
And then you come back to the US, you are dabbling in the waters of like these spiritual things. Is there anything more you want to share about like that era of like finding David Lynch's work about creativity or early meditation stuff? Like, was there anything else going on during that time?
Let me think. Well, I felt like in meditating and then serendipitously getting this job, I felt like that then sort of started this, I think, sense of, I guess for the lack of a better word, following signs from the universe, where it just felt like, okay, I think because meditation expanded my sense of intuition and being open to receiving messages outside of my ego voice, I felt like it was then just learning to follow my intuition, which then led to more opportunities and more aligned relationships, and also trusting my own inner voice, and also expanding my art to a bigger audience. So I really felt like those early to mid 20s, it was a fertile ground of really starting to form art community. I started to hang out with a bunch of DIY zine makers,
Yeah.
which I think then started this whole trajectory of getting more into the zine community and taking zine fest and making indie comics. And so I felt like it was maybe the first time in my adulthood where it really felt like, oh, I'm just following these nudges from the universe, and things are just kind of like being threaded together as I follow these nudges or intuitions or people's positions.
Yeah, I find the whole topic of intuition really interesting, and I'm curious like how you experimented with that. Like how did you try to notice the nudges, or was there any sort of a process around it, or did it just happen naturally?
I think it just sort of happened naturally over time. I would say clairsentience is probably, if I had to choose a psychic ability, I think clairsentience is probably what I most align with, where it's just, an inner sense of knowing that I trust and go with.
Totally. Do you like feel it somewhere in your body, or is it like a sound? Like what, can you describe it? I'm just so curious.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, maybe I feel it more in my chest, where it's just kind of like this somatic yes that's like, oh yeah, do this, or somatic no that's like, oh, don't do that. And me just being like, okay, I'll
I'm here for the ride. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. Yeah, totally. Well, so it's interesting to hear you say that in your early 20s, you started to cultivate more of this intuition awareness and these nudges. And then earlier, when you were talking about the ayahuasca experience, you said that that was a betrayal of your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, was like you were like building that up for so many years and then had this like huge, like, whoa, I shouldn't have said yes to that or something. Like, I'm just trying to put those pieces together.
Yeah, I don't even know how I would explain it per se,
Yeah.
but I feel like ultimately, now with a lot more perspective, I think at the time it felt like a betrayal of my intuition, but I think now as more time passed,
100%.
I don't see it as a betrayal of my intuition or
Right.
more.
Yeah, but it maybe felt like it's super intense when
It
you're going
did,
through it.
yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think those like crises of intuition can be like extremely destabilizing and traumatic on its own.
Sure.
Because it's like your internal system of trust and like faith can get rattled. And I think that especially in maybe like a Western scientific paradigm, like we don't value that.
Right.
I think that level of there's like actually like a major level of trauma that can occur when somebody's internal faith system gets like rattled in that way. But like we don't see it as very important in our culture. I don't know. Are you with me?
No, I think like just recently in the last year, I came across this phrase. I think it was ontological rupture. Ontological something where basically some event completely disrupts your sense of just, I guess, your conceptual frameworks of who you are in existence and everything that you know. And so I definitely feel like it was this ontological rupture.
Yeah, for sure.
And going through all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just naming that. I think that's like an underestimatedly traumatic thing to go through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, when did the witchy stuff start happening? You said that was like in the mid 2010s. Like, did you meet somebody or read a book? Like, what started happening in that era?
Well, I go back to one incident, which was that I was introduced to these two really awesome girlfriends who are my best friends of to this day. And I think we were all really into self-help books and spirituality, but not in this organized religion way, and interested in witchy things, but not in a serious way. And so it all came head on when we all took a road trip to Santa Fe. And one of my friends for fun was like, oh, my mentor has this local psychic that she really likes. And so she decided, oh, wouldn't it be fun if this tarot person gave us a house visit and gave all of us readings? And this was my first time having a proper psychic reading from a tarot reader psychic. And we all listened in on each other's readings because she just did it all for us. Whoa. As we were sitting across from her at this long dinner table. And I think because this psych, she was so good, she just like brought up very specific things like, oh, certain family members and very specific things that weren't Chinese fortune cookie.
Like it's a little bit too specific that you could make it up.
Right. That I think it's a stereotype of psychics being snake oil sales per people or whatever. And then she also was bringing up to one friend, oh, you seem to have this heavy energy, so maybe get some obsidian to have near you, and also some get some Palo Santo sticks to burn them. And so I think for all of us, we were like, what's Palo Santo? What? Obsidian? What does that mean? And so after that, we were all back in LA. We went to this crystal shop.
Wait, can I stop you for a sec?
Yes.
Wait, so she was such a good psychic that her saying you guys should burn Palo Santo and buy obsidian, you were like, yeah, I guess we should because like this was so intense. Like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
I think we all felt that she nailed it. And
100%.
with our respective psychic readings, which you all get to hear in on. So it wasn't like she gave the same advice to everybody. She
Totally.
like captured energetically what each of us were going through.
Yeah.
And so I think we all were just like, okay, well, I guess we need to like do those things that she told us to do.
Right. That's what I would do if I was in that situation. Okay, I guess I'll just do what.
And so I feel like that's then was kind of started this whole, I guess the witchy arc of my plot of then that sort of snowballed into going to more metaphysical events and then going to other witchy workshops, meeting more intuitives and psychics, and then being more immersed into that world. And I think, you know, before that, I had such little exposure to real working intuitives and psychics. And now I know quite a few. And I think I just have such a profound respect for them, for the work that they do. And I would say once or twice a year, I get a psychic session from healers I trust or psychics recommended from other friends. And yeah, I think it's one of those things that is really devalued by Western culture, but I think one must remind oneself that before colonization, intuitives and psychics were very valued functions in society, and it's something that we should value.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, it's like it's a legitimate source of information, and it's like legitimate data that I think is like just as legitimate as like physical data. But we have like this physicalism supremacy.
Yeah.
So we devalue this other source of information. I kind of view like intuitive knowledge as just like supplemental information.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, it's just like another form of data that's just like a little bit harder to quantify in a scientific way.
Yeah.
100%. So when you say like the witchy arc, it sounds to me like you were kind of opening yourself up to kind of like subtle things.
Yeah.
Like having subtler experiences. Does that feel right?
Yeah, that feels right. I felt like then I started to play around with my own tarot deck and buy crystals and light candles and finally learn my rising sign and moon sign.
That's right. Totally.
And pay attention to the cycles of the moon. And I think, like you said, that subtle knowing that I think gets lost in patriarchy.
100%. Yeah. How did it affect your life? Like, did anything change or you started having different kinds of experiences?
Well, I would say the beginnings of the witchy arc did make me realize that I needed to end a 10-year relationship, which was a very big thing. I mean, yeah, I think for anybody who has ended a very long-term relationship, it's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think it really did completely expand my art practice, my spirituality. One of my most favorite things I've done in my 30s was, so unfortunately this residency no longer exists, but there was a residency called the Golden Dome Residency, which was the intersection of art and magic and community. And it was founded by this psychic, my friend Eliza Swan. And it's this whole amazing backstory where she went to graduate school in the UK to get an MFA in art. And at the time, her witchy art was just really looked down upon and not taken seriously. And so she sort of had this existential crisis where she then went to the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, the remains of that temple, and asked, what do I need to do right now? And she said she heard a voice that was like, oh, you need to find the school called the Golden Dome School and start that.
Whoa.
And so she started this whole residency series where every 1 week residency that happened once or twice a year was focused on the archetype of the major arcana.
Mm.
So in sequential order, going through all the major arcana. And so it's like a group of maybe I would say 10 to 12 artists with witchy artists with different disciplines and backgrounds, and learning about tarot, learning different ways to get psychic information, and doing group rituals out in nature. And it was so incredible. So I did 3 sessions of this. I did the Hierophant and the Chariot and the Hermit. And through those sessions, I just met so many incredible people. And I think it was maybe my first time really doing intentional group magic out in nature, and just really sort of like interfacing with nature and other people and the spirits and also art. And so that really completely blew my mind. And to this day, it's like one of my most favorite things I've done as far as expanding my art and spiritual and witchy practice.
Whoa. Was that like the first real nexus of spirituality and art really coming together for you?
I think so, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Wow. And you look back on that and that was like a major point of like transformation and like things coming together. That's so cool.
Yeah.
It was called the Golden Dome Residency?
The Golden Dome School.
Oh, the Golden Dome School.
Before that, I feel like my art was very maybe individual focused. And so I feel like in getting more into a witchy sense of things, I think it then really expanded my artwork to, okay, it's not just about me. I'm also channeling nature. I'm channeling the land. I'm in relationship with my ancestors, with spirit guides, with other people, and just really, expanding that inner cosmology of what art is and what art can do.
Oh, okay. So maybe like before that, you were making a lot of art about your personal experiences?
Or even if it wasn't necessarily about my personal experiences, I think maybe the framework for making art was like, I as an individual am making art, and this is about and my upward mobility. So the marketplace of art and status or whatever.
Oh, and then like the other thing, the phrase like spirit ecology just came into my head. It was like my art is part of this larger ecology of like spirit or the subtle world.
Different lineages and even like, you know, the past and the future all kind of collapsing and, you know, everything simultaneously happening at once and all of that. Yeah.
Was this around the time, because you said earlier that you like to make comics that help to make abstract ideas more accessible? Like, were you doing some work kind of like that during this period?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. But was that something you were already doing, or did that I think
I was already doing it. So yeah, I wouldn't say it was all completely an individual pursuit of capitalistic greatness. But I feel like, you know, similar to how going to Okinawa really gave me that embodied somatic experience of, I think, the grief and violence of colonialism. I think, you know, being in these witchy communities then gave me this more somatic embodied experience of what it means to create art, knowing that we are all in this interconnected fabric.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I relate with your path as an artist actually a lot, and I feel like when I started integrating more spiritual things into my life, I started to feel like my art was less about my individual capacity to make things, and I started to feel more like the things that I create, I'm just like a vector of like other influences to help me to make work. It's not just about me. Does that is that kind of similar to what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Like it's not just coming from my individual head and it's all my ideas. It's like I started to get like more curious, like where do ideas come from?
Yeah.
Is my mind like, you know, seriously. Yeah. So I think art can be just like a place for ideas that are floating around in the ether to finally be materialized.
Oh,
for people to
absolutely.
enjoy. Totally.
I always go back to when I teach my classes discipline as pleasure, I always reference this TED talk that Elizabeth Gilbert did, the author Elizabeth Gilbert, where she talks about how, you know, in ancient cultures, it wasn't that you were a genius, but that you had a relationship with a genius. And so, I think in Western culture, modern Western culture, there's that deification of a person being a genius. But I think if we shift the framework to having a relationship with a genius, then, it's a more, it's coming from a more humble place where
That's the word.
you're being a good listener and having clear channels as opposed to being somebody that's better than everybody else.
Yeah, or like having to have so much ownership
Right, that
over the
too,
thing.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it's one thing to, like, you want to respect your abilities as an artist and as a creator and not let people steal things, that's one thing, but to have too much ownership over these ideas as being your self-evident thing that you came up with, I feel like is a step away from reality. It's like, where do these things
Yeah.
really come from?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
because we all have, I think we're all like, we all our ideas all have a lineage and are in conversation with something. And so I think it's just this ongoing collective conversation. And as artists, we are channeling certain threads of those conversations that's
totally.
tangibly felt by other people.
Totally. Totally. So the witchy arc, as we call it, it sounds like it was really influencing your art practice.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. And do you feel like that's something that has persisted, or do you feel like there's any aspects of that that you've kind of left behind? Anything that you still work with regularly from that time period?
Yeah, I would say I don't buy crystals as much anymore.
That's okay.
um, but that being said, I still have oracle decks and a tarot deck I regularly check. I mean, I even made my own affirmation deck
Oh,
because
yeah.
I love the medium of oracle and tarot decks so much. Um, and also I think, as I learn more about my Okinawan lineage, I think I also sort of see for myself personally, I sort of see the limitations of, I guess, maybe witchy culture because it does come from like a very, or at least like the mainstream aspects of it, it does come from a very Eurocentric tradition,
100%.
which is not a part of my lineage. So I think I'm also just very curious about, well, what are the things that were specific to my Okinawan lineage and traditions, and how can I learn more about those things and also connect with other people who are also interested in those things.
So, is this a good time to maybe transition to the stuff about Okinawa? Because I'm so curious to hear more about that
Absolutely.
history. Like, what do you want to speak on with that?
Yeah, so and these are things that I didn't know until I would say fairly recently, much later in my adulthood, which is that I think I grew up, so Okinawa is technically a prefecture of the many prefectures of Japan. And so, as it is like in the official political sense. And so, I think growing up, knowing that my mother was from mainland Japan and my father was from mainland Okinawa, I think I just sort of had this idea in my head that, oh, Okinawa is just the southernmost tropical part of Japan, like just a part of Japan. And, even though I had some exposure to Okinawan culture, like I did grow up visiting Okinawa several times, visiting extended family in Okinawa, as well as getting snippets of Okinawan culture here and there in childhood. I didn't really occur to me that, oh, Okinawa, it had its own completely different history and language and culture.
Language?
Yes. Yes,
I'm
I
learning
didn't know
so
that
much right now.
much later in adulthood, Okinawa has its own indigenous language. And so Okinawa was its own independent kingdom, the Ryukyu kingdom, but it was annexed by Japan, I would say in the late 1800s, I want to say. And so
this is like recent history. I mean, there's a long human history, but like that's like not that long ago.
Right. And so in being colonized by Japan, then Okinawa was forced to assimilate to mainstream Japanese culture. So speaking the indigenous language became outlawed in the island. And also I think temples and shrines, they were sort of Shinto-ified. And so then those old structures of female priestesses having power, so there was a certain class of female priestesses who held positions of high power in the royal courts, like that disappeared. And also as Japan was colonizing the rest of Asia, Okinawans were sent as cheap laborers to lands that were colonized by Japan. And so Okinawans, they were seen as lower class, lesser than, like in reading the novel Pachinko, which is about Korean laborers who were forced to work in Japan. Like there's like mention of signs and businesses that would say no Koreans, no Okinawans in businesses in Japan. And also I think just recently is the anniversary of the Battle of Okinawa. So the only land invasion of the country of Japan was when US troops invaded Okinawa. And so this was like in the final stages of Japan losing in World War II. And so as the US troops were encroaching on Okinawa, the Japanese Imperial Army told the local Okinawans, "Oh, the US Army is approaching. It's better for you to commit suicide than to be captured by Americans." And so there was this push for basically people to commit suicide en masse. So like throwing themselves off cliffs or stabbing themselves and their family members, or, you know, there are also many who were hiding out in caves and starving to death. And also many libraries and depositories of knowledge were burned and destroyed.
Painful. Yeah.
And so
like of like the knowledge of Okinawan history.
Yes. I mean, certainly there are still documents and books that exist, but also much was lost. And then so I think to this day there is this, I think the Japanese government downplays or completely dilutes or erases Okinawan's specific lineage that is different from Japanese culture and how Japan has colonized Okinawa. So the indigenous language, Uchinaguchi, it's now officially considered a near extinct language by UNESCO. I mean, there are certainly revitalization efforts that's happening on the local level as well as in different diasporic global communities. But a lot was lost in those few generations of Japanese being this state mandated language. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, and also, you know, in the aftermath of World War II and America winning as the victor in this World War II, so then America basically took over the revitalization of Japan, and also as a consequence of that, there are still US military bases throughout Japan, but even though Okinawa only composes a very small percentage of the total landmass of Japan, I want to say about like 70% of US military bases in Japan are concentrated in Okinawa because it is I think geopolitically, because of its proximity to Taiwan and China.
It's like advantageous for
Yes,
the US
exactly.
to be specifically there.
And those like gross geopolitical.
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
Of course, yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
So, and so also, to this day, there are still plans of more U.S. military bases being built, which then obviously is disrupting the local ecosystems. And also, there is a whole tradition of resistance against these U.S. military bases being built by the locals. And so these are all things that I really didn't know until very recently. And so I feel like there was also this grief I had to go through of, all this time I could have known about these things that would have filled out sort of my sense of who I am and where I come from.
Totally.
And to sort of grieve all that time when I didn't know these things. But the one beautiful thing that came out of, one of the many beautiful things that came out of visiting Okinawa and posting about it on my Instagram is that I felt like then all these Okinawan followers came out of the woodworks.
Really?
Yeah. And nice. Got to meet a lot of really awesome fellow diasporic Okinawan people. A lot of them based in Los Angeles, and also people who basically became new internet friends who are part of the diaspora and also have wrestled with the things that I have gone through. And so that was also just a really beautiful thing that came out of this whole experience.
Yeah. Like, do these people that you've met that are Okinawans, like, did they have their own information about it that you could like learn from them too? And like learn about the culture a little bit more?
Yeah, and also like for some of the people based in Los Angeles, we've even had a couple of meetups where
nice.
you would just have a potluck and connect with each other and share stories. And yeah, I think just through conversation, then you just learn even more snippets of Okinawan culture, history, language, and I think if colonization is a fragmentation, then decolonization then is bringing those fragments together and creating this new sense of wholeness that was taken away from us.
Totally. Well, just to kind of like start closing out, because we're almost here at the end of our time, like what else have you learned about like traditional Okinawan like religious or spiritual practice that maybe you've been trying to just learn more about?
Well, one major tradition is that so I think the earliest historical records go back to maybe the 1400s, but there is this lineage of basically all Okinawan women getting these hand tattoos called hajichi during different stages of their life, starting with, I want to say, adolescence, and then expanding on it in different stages of their life. And so once Okinawa was colonized by Japan, these tattoo practices became illegal. So in Japan, there is a huge anti-tattoo bias where to this day...
I've heard about that.
Yes. Even a lot of public baths, they don't allow people with tattoos. And I have 2 very small tattoos. And so when I went to a public bath or a hot spring bath close to where my parents live, I was immediately flagged and had to buy these little Band-Aids to cover.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, my 2 very small tattoos. And so a lot of places are still very strict about that, though there are a lot of tattoo-friendly places that are starting to open up because of the influx of tourists. But basically for a couple of generations, nobody had hand tattoos because it became illegal and then looked down upon because it didn't fit in with Japanese culture. But I would say...
So I'm hearing you say, because I've heard of the tattoo thing in Japan being taboo, but am I hearing you say that like part of that tabooness is because of Okinawan indigenous culture and not allowing
Well,
that?
so I think that anti-tattoo bias existed before Japan colonized Okinawa, and I think to this day there is this association of tattoos only being used by criminals.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of that, and so that anti-tattoo bias that already existed was then applied to the colonized Okinawans, and so I want to say within my generation, there has been younger diasporic Okinawan tattoo artists who want to bring this tradition back. And so in the diasporic communities, there has been a resurgence of tattoo artists wanting to learn the tradition and how different regions have different markings. And basically putting those markings on their hands. And so that's something I definitely want to do the next time I visit Okinawa, to start on those hand tattoos. And there is like also there is a whole community of hajicha, which is the name of the tattoo artists who do these traditional Okinawan hand tattoos. And so since then I've seen other people with it, and I know people who also practice it. And there's also a lot of spiritual significance with these symbols. So the ones at least associated with mainland Okinawan hand tattoos, like there's certain symbols that is like, okay, if you have this on your hand, you will meet with your ancestors in paradise.
Okay. Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm really excited to somatically be a part of that,
Totally.
which I didn't know about until much later in my adulthood.
Right, but am I hearing you say that you feel like particularly drawn to this tattoo tradition?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Are there any like, so is there like there's like, I'm hearing you say like there's like a spiritual quality to the tattoos. Like if you get a certain tattoo, it will grant you certain things in the afterlife, so to speak. But like it's like a spiritual practice to have the hand tattoos.
Yes, I think it's spiritual, and also I think a marker of certain milestones, different stages of your life. So I think so the traditional way was that you would start with maybe 2 small dots on each hand, and then progressively it gets filled out. And then I've heard one person say that then the symbols and shapes on your hands, you make it thicker with every person you know that has died, or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's really, and so I later asked my aunt about it, and she says she remembers, she has a childhood memory of an older aunt having these hand tattoos on her hands, and that they were very big. And so that was probably the last generation that had the hand tattoos before it then became illegal. So there was this gap of several generations, but now people are bringing it back.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is that because there still is such a huge tattoo bias, an anti-tattoo bias in Japan, I would say a lot of people in Okinawa, especially those who then migrate to mainland Japan, they likely are not able to get it because it would affect their employment.
Yeah.
And so I think it's extra important that people like me, where I'm probably never going to have a traditional day job in my life.
Oh, right. You can revive the practice in your own way.
I can do it because it's not my employment, and
100%.
I care less about those things. So
yeah, totally. Oh God, I got you. Yeah, so you in diaspora in Los Angeles can revive the practice for the sake of everybody.
Yeah,
totally.
And I would say there are people in Japan and Okinawa who have it, and they very likely have non-traditional jobs, like they're artists or tattoo artists, or people who are sort of living more on the unconventional path.
For sure. For sure. Wow. Well, Yumi, we have to start kind of phasing out of here.
Oh, this is so fun.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I learned so much even just now. I had no idea about that with Okinawa. So I'm going to also look up those tattoos. Like, I can't wait to.
Most people don't know about Okinawa being its own independent sovereign kingdom before the colonization of Japan. I think, even people in Japan, they
No, totally.
don't know. They're just like, oh no, Okinawans are also Japanese. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, it's very entrenched. The erasure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, I'm sure that this is going to be a really fun listen for people that are familiar with your art to like learn more about your personal spiritual history. And it was really awesome to hear the whole story. And I'm just wondering, just before we go, like, is there anything you want to shamelessly plug? Like something you're working on or something that's coming up that you want to share about?
Yeah, I would say get my affirmation deck, Cosmic Comfort, if you haven't already. And I am on a regular basis offering virtual workshops. I don't know when this podcast will come out, but my next iteration of Discipline is Pleasure is, I want to say, in mid-July. And
also, yeah, I'm releasing this next week, so people will know that.
Yeah, so let me find the exact date, actually. Yeah, so July 19th, I'm doing another live stream of Discipline is Pleasure. So, and that's one of my most popular webinars. So definitely check that out.
Yay!
And yeah, stay tuned for more projects that I'm incubating that I can't talk about yet.
Totally. Is there a preferred way for people to like check you out online or any places you'd like people to connect with you, if at all?
I would say I'm the most active on Instagram these days, but also if you're not a social media person, I do also have a newsletter that lets people know of my most current offerings. So you can also subscribe to my newsletter by going to my website, which is yumisakugawa.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Cool. Is that it? Is that all you want to share to make sure people know how to connect with you?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Awesome. Well, just before we go, what was this like to tell your story today? Did you like learn anything new about yourself or like unearth something that surprised you?
Well, I think maybe I was surprised by how not a big deal it felt like to talk about my ayahuasca experience.
Yeah.
Like it really was this monumental traumatic thing. But speaking about it in a public platform now, I'm like, oh, okay, it's
totally.
No, like you said, it was just one of those things that happened and information came out of it.
Yeah, it was a neutral way to put it. Yeah, I'm hearing you say that like you're surprised at how easy it was for you to talk about something that was really hard. And that says maybe that you're in a new place now where you've processed a lot of that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
for sure. I know that feeling. I know that feeling for sure. Well, I've got to go, but it was so awesome to chat with you. And maybe I'll connect with you sometime if you ever come to Denver.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We definitely will.
Wonderful. Okay, cool. So I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll see you guys some other time. Okay, bye. All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to connect with Yumi, you can learn more about them in the description for this episode, wherever you're listening to it. And of course, check out their Oracle deck. That is so cool. I hope that you get that and enjoy it. And other than that, if you are loving Gracepilled, if you're really excited about this arc that I'm on of doing these podcast episodes, do a girl a favor and send your favorite Gracepilled episode to a friend, to a colleague, to a family member, to someone that you think will like it. Word of mouth is the way these things really grow, so I would super duper appreciate that. And if you've got an extra $5 you'd like to throw towards the show so that I can upgrade equipment and better compensate people in the future and just really feel like people are saying yes to me doing this, you can signal yes, keep doing this by subscribing to that $5 tier on my Patreon. And then other than that, you can check out my website. That's hannawilliams.com, Hanna Williams.com. My dad bought me that domain name in 1997. Or catch me on Instagram at grace.pilled. And if you feel inspired to dive deeper into my world or receive guidance from me, my Patreon is the best way to do that, just to start. You can sign up and join our live Q&A sessions and also get access to my huge library of courses and talks that I've given over the years that encompass everything that you need to live a highly devotional, God is everything lifestyle. So that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week.